Welcome to the Bonfire Chat, the podcast of the Bajan Firefighters Network. I'm your host, Glenn Aline, and my guest today is Kevin Noel, Senior Account Manager at Spatial Innovision Limited, a geospatial information solutions provider in Trinidad and Tobago. Welcome to the podcast, Kevin. We are happy to have you join us.
Thank you very much, Mr. Allen. It's great to be here.
Kevin, for the benefit of our listeners, can you explain what a geographic information system is and how it is used in the context of public safety?
Okay. So when we talk about geographic information systems, we are talking about a system that uh, unites spatial or location data with other types of information to give, uh, let's use public safety, to give responders and decision makers a holistic operational picture of the situations that they're looking at. Um, it is widely used in a wide variety of avenues, a wide variety of industries. It's not by any means a new technology. GIS has been around for quite a long time. And to put it bluntly, GIS comes down to simply this. Everything happens somewhere. And when you can understand the where and the why and the what and the how and put all of that together, you can have a more holistic picture, and it allows for intelligent, data-driven decision making.
Fantastic. I'm very excited about this topic because I've seen GIS and geospatial information implemented during the COVID-19 pandemic. And recently, the fire service has also been looking at making greater use of this technology. So this area for me is a very exciting one. What would you say are some of the key benefits of integrating GIS into public safety operations?
Well, GIS functions as uh, a system of record, allowing for the collection and the curating and the management of data. It also serves as a system of engagement, so it facilitates the exchange of information between different stakeholders in an organization or within a country, allowing for a common operating picture to develop. And it also functions as a system of insight. So it allows you to analyze data, to recognize and identify patterns, to run models that may be predictive to give you an idea of what can happen based on certain parameters. And it supports, as I said before, intelligent, data-driven decision making. And for us in the fire and rescue industry, and public safety on a whole, GIS plays a big part in emergency response planning and management, in incident mapping, in predictive analysis in terms of being able to identify, as I said, when certain conditions develop, what can be the likely outcome so that you can plan ahead of it. In effective resource allocation, knowing where to put your resources, at what point in time so that you can maximize your coverage and your impact. It plays a very big part in search and rescue operations. In infrastructure management, whether it be doing facilities management in a fire station or managing a fire hydrant network with thousands of units attached. And it also aids in hazard management, in public awareness and communication and engagement, and in data sharing and collaboration. So pretty much any aspect of the world of a firefighter can be impacted by and improved by the correct strategic application of GIS.
Okay. During your recent webinar, I was intrigued because I had no idea there were so many facets to the ArcGIS system and the add-ons that they can use to really give you situational awareness. I was really intrigued. Give our listeners some practical examples of specific ways that GIS technology can be used to enhance emergency response and disaster management.
Okay. Well, as you know, Glenn, I have also been a part of the fire service. I was a professional firefighter with the Trinidad and Tobago Fire Service for 20 years up until 2022. And I can share my experience. We in Trinidad have a very large fire hydrant network. And as often happens when you have very large asset networks to manage, if you are using a manual system, a paper-based system to manage that, it's very difficult to maintain dynamic records. And what that resulted in over time is that a lot of our hydrants may have fallen into disrepair because we could not keep track of maintenance schedules. We utilized over the last 4 years or so an application called ArcGIS Survey 123 to actually go out in the field, do inspections, do mapping of our fire hydrant networks. Um, and then we push that information forward into ArcGIS dashboards, into web applications, so that both our operational responders and our decision makers can see what's going on in real time, and they can then strategize how they want to manage maintenance schedules and plans, hydrant replacements if they need to, and also being able to identify communities that, even though the community is growing in terms of the number of persons moving in and the types of buildings going up, the fire hydrant network may have been stuck a couple decades backwards. So it allows us to then plan ahead in terms of the coverage that these communities need, and then strategically apply the necessary resources so that we always maintain that level of coverage. From a disaster management or an emergency management point of view, ArcGIS, and I'm speaking specifically about ArcGIS software. GIS plays an important part in terms of pre-incident plans. It allows you to collect data from multiple different resources on different attributes, and then put that information together to build that common operating picture. So when you do your fire prevention inspections, when you do your fire hydrant network inspections, when you do your hazard identification planning, you can then build a 360-degree view of that particular community. And that will allow you to then better utilize your resources in terms of being able to meet the needs of those communities and to mitigate against different types of hazards or risks that may develop.
I can see how these tools from the fire department standpoint can be of tremendous benefits, not only in the area of the hydrants, but other areas as well. But how can GIS be deployed now to analyze crime patterns and to aid law enforcement agencies in crime prevention and investigation?
Yes, GIS is currently used a lot in terms of law enforcement. From an analysis and prediction point of view, we can utilize, and we do utilize ArcGIS in terms of analyzing historic crime data and combining that with other types of information like demographics or environmental factors to predict potential crime hotspots and trends. And then that allows law enforcement decision makers to deploy resources and other mitigation measures accordingly. From the point of view of actual response, one of the things that firefighters and law enforcement, public safety on a whole will agree with me with is that our ability to respond quickly to an incident sometimes decides how successful our intervention is. And you can use ArcGIS to to plan routes, to identify um, the best ways to get to communities, to identify possible hazards and conditions that may limit our ability to respond, so that we can be the most efficient that we can be in our efforts. So from the point of view of policing and law enforcement, ArcGIS allows them to better deploy officers in the field so that they can be the best possible coverage um, when they have to respond to an incident. And sometimes just being in the right place at the right time for a law enforcement officer serves as a very big deterrent to crime.
We are in some very exciting times, and I, for one, I just love the technology that is being leveraged to improve the efficiency of public safety. And I really want to commend you, Kevin, for opening our eyes to the possibilities that exist and where we can take this technology to really enhance operational and situational awareness and to make a more enhanced pre-planning and response so we can better serve the public. This is the Bonfire Chat, the podcast of the Bajan Firefighters Network. We will be right back after this public service announcement.
Fire kills, but you can prevent it. Follow these simple directions. Plan and practice an escape route and make sure everyone knows it. Keep keys to hand, but safe. Make sure all exits are kept clear. The best escape route is the exit that you use all the time. But have a plan B, so you can all escape quickly.
Welcome back to the Bonfire Chat, the podcast of the Bajan Firefighters Network. I'm your host, Glenn Aline. With me today is Kevin Noel, Senior Account Manager at Spatial Innovision Limited, a geospatial information solutions provider in Trinidad and Tobago. Kevin, in what ways can GIS assist in managing and maintaining public safety assets? You had mentioned before about the fire hydrants, etc. How else can we leverage this technology in terms of assets?
From an asset management point of view, GIS serves in being able to collect real-time data to and ArcGIS can integrate with a wide range of IoT, that's Internet of Things devices like sensors, cameras, etc., to allow for that sort of real-time data collection. That allows decision makers and operational personnel to better strategize how they use resources to maintain assets. So one of the things that's very exciting that's happening right now is the integration and development of indoor mapping, where you can bring data in from the layout of a building or a compound, and then integrate real-time data analysis into that, so you can track. I know that there are programs in the US and other countries now where you have wearable GPS devices that first responders can use. They can be tracked and monitored as they go through a building that is within the indoor GIS system, and they can be directed to where they need to go. So from an asset management point of view and a resource management point of view, GIS can integrate with different types of sensors like that to allow you to best utilize how your resources are being allocated and do that in a real-time sort of way.
Indeed, I can see this technology being used even from the standpoint of our hurricane shelters. Many of our schools are listed and categorized as hurricane shelters and can be occupied by the public during the hurricane season once their homes have been compromised. So I can see how leveraging geospatial information could be of benefit to our disaster management practitioners and how we can better keep track of all of our shelters and the resources that are being deployed there. During critical situations, quick decision making is essential. How does GIS enable real time decision making for public safety professionals?
Yeah, as you said, real time decision making is very critical um, in the midst of an emergency. And because GIS allows for the integration of data from multiple different sources and the effective visualizing of that sort of information, it allows decision makers to build a comprehensive view of ongoing situations, not just waiting for sporadic updates, but actually being able to collect data in real time, bring it together and synthesize it and visualize that data in a way that everyone, all stakeholders, can see the same picture at the same time. Um, During an actual emergency response, that real-time data can facilitate the provision of critical information to frontline responders. It helps them to assess uh, which affected areas they need to respond to, what are the particular hazards they may encounter, and they themselves can actually report back in real time as to the hazards that they encounter so that the further deployment of teams could be done in a safe way. It's very important in terms of uh, logistics and resource management, knowing where to place your assets, where to place your vehicles, where to put resources. You mentioned schools being used as emergency shelters, and that's a common practice in most places. One of the things we have to consider as well is that in the event of a situation like a hurricane, where you have challenges in terms of flooding, which of your shelters would be most at risk? Because you don't want to send people to a particular shelter and then find out they get trapped inside of a flood. So you can use GIS to model information in terms of water flow path, in terms of where proximity to rivers, in terms of the topography to identify which shelters are most likely to be affected and how you can redirect people from those places. Um, and in terms of law enforcement, it actually allows police departments to monitor where their personnel are located, where they are needed in terms of traffic control, in terms of helping people evacuate, all of these sort of things. And to take it a step further, that real-time GIS can also be used to assist travelers, persons coming into your country, whether it be by air, persons who are using their own private craft in terms of yachts and so on, being able to give them traffic updates, being able to give them weather updates, location-based recommendations to make sure that they as well can be safe in the midst of an emergency.
That is indeed fantastic, Kev. You continue to broaden our horizons where we can deploy this technology. Could you provide an example of a scenario where GIS played a crucial role in coordinating efforts between different public safety agencies during an emergency?
Um, I think a good example of this would be of the current situation in Hawaii, um, where we have forest
Yes.
fires that wreak havoc on particular towns and cities. GIS actually is playing a very big role in terms of response during the incident, being able to get people out of certain communities, being able to give them forewarning to move. In terms of the actual response to the disaster, GIS is a central part of the deployment of search and rescue teams. Unfortunately, the deployment of teams to recover bodies for persons who may have been trapped, and being able to carry out that search in a systematic way, where you have response teams coming from multiple different agencies all over the United States. Because they're speaking the same technological language, which is GIS, these teams can coordinate with each other. They see the same picture, and they know where all the other resources are located. So there's no duplication of effort. Nobody is stepping on anyone's toes, and you have the maximum efficiency in terms of how they carry out their work, to the point where they are now pretty much complete with the search and rescue operations, and the community can now begin its recovery and rehabilitation.
Indeed, I can clearly see how that would be of a tremendous benefit to that ongoing situation there in Hawaii. And of course, we extend our condolences to all those who have lost their lives in that incident. I think this morning the official death count is now well past 1,000 persons. So the estimation is that during the next few days, that count will very well rise even further, because there's still some more than 800 persons who are still missing. It's a very tragic and unfortunate circumstance.
Yes, and if I may, Glenn, it also highlights the severity with which natural and man-made disasters can impact on those of us who live in islands. I mean, Hawaii is not necessarily considered a small island state, but there are many parallels between territories like Hawaii and us here in the Caribbean. We have to depend on each other, and most of the times, because of our geography, it means that when a major disaster takes place, we have no choice but to depend on what's right in front of us, because it will take a while before assistance can come from off island. And because of this, disasters tend to be particularly harsh in terms of their impact on persons in small island developing states like us in the Caribbean. And that's the reason why we need to find ways to utilize all the technology at our disposal to make the job of mitigating against and preparing for natural and man-made disasters to carry that out in the most effective way possible. So it's important for us as first responders, as disaster managers, to utilize whatever tools are at our disposal to be best prepared for when a disaster strikes.
Kevin, I support your comments wholeheartedly, but I will be the first to admit that one of the greatest challenges to us leveraging this technology comes back to funding and finance. Once we can put measures in place to obtain funding, I'm sure we will go a long way towards actually implementing and utilizing this technology. GIS technology is also evolving. What do you think are emerging trends or innovations in GIS that could have a significant impact on public safety agencies in the future?
In terms of public safety and GIS, I think two things come to mind. One is the ability to integrate Internet of Things in terms of sensors, and the ability to map indoors. I think those two things are game changers for us as emergency responders and as public safety officers. It gives us additional room to work. It gives us additional access to data and information in real time. I as a firefighter, one of the toughest things to do is navigate inside of a structure that you may be unfamiliar with. In the midst of an emergency, in the midst of a fire, IoT is now being integrated into many aspects of even what firefighters wear. We have IoT sensors that go on our SCBA sets, IoT sensors integrated into our visors on our helmets, wearable sensors that monitor stress and health levels of firefighters in the midst of a response. And all of those things require and need a location element, a spatial element, in order to function well. And this is where GIS comes in, so that your fire service managers, your decision makers, your line managers are no longer just sending people into an incident and waiting for feedback, but they can now monitor in real time what's going on. And I think those two things are very critical in terms of how they are being developed right now and being used. And another thing that I think is very critical too for firefighters and emergency responders to pay attention to is the idea of integrating AI into how we do our plans and how we prepare for our incidents. There's a lot of automation that's happening now. I mean, everyone knows about ChatGPT, but AI is actually extends way beyond that now and can be integrated into so much that we do in terms of doing predictive modeling and planning ahead and forecasting. And when it is integrated with GIS, well, it just takes it to a whole other level. So I think it's very important for first responders and public safety officers to pay attention to how GIS, location-based information and location-based operations, integrates with other forms of technology such as AI and IoT, Internet of Things, to really make our jobs more efficient as public safety officers.
You are correct from the standpoint of the application of AI. In the past few months, we've seen an explosion in very different ways that AI can be brought to bear on many subjects, from the medical fraternity to the colleges to software development, engineering, manufacturing. One of the things that caught my attention recently, I saw a news program where the guy actually implemented AI technology in developing tractors for agriculture, and they were using lasers to actually control things like the grass. So gone are the days now of using herbicides. They were actually burning the grass with lasers, and the actual AI can detect and determine what is actually grass and what is actually vegetables. It was fantastic.
Yes, yes. We are living in a very exciting time in terms of how technology is being leveraged. I think it's important for us in the fire and rescue and EMS side of the public safety community to not be dragged along with progress, but rather to get in front of it, do our research, see how it can benefit us, and then find strategic ways to integrate what can work for us into our operations and into our culture as organizations. And I think that's going to make a big difference in how our firefighters and EMS officers and law enforcement officers work in the coming years.
Indeed. Kevin, I want to thank you for joining our podcast today. It was indeed a pleasure having you. You've opened our eyes. You've broadened our horizons to so much today. It was delightful. And I'm sure our listeners would have received some pertinent information and some real insight into how geospatial information can be advantageous in terms of response services and also public safety on the whole. So once again, our sincere thanks to you. This is the Bonfire Chat, the podcast of the Bajan Firefighters Network. Join us again for another informative session very soon. Kevin, thanks once again.
Thank you very much for having me.
Have yourselves a safe and enjoyable day. God bless.